Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Perico woke up in a cold sweat. When he realized that he was in his bedroom, he calmed down. He felt a familiar sense of relief. Everything was all right. Just a moment ago, cold water was covering his head. It was pouring into his nose, down his throat, filling his lungs, not letting him breathe. The distant shore appeared for a few seconds, then disappeared again. Perico was dragged down into the dark, cold water. With his last efforts, he reached the surface to take a life-saving breath and then disappeared again into the waves of the sea. There was no more strength to fight. It was only a nightmare, but... In fact, Perico had almost drowned once. He still had nightmares about that day, so vivid, so realistic, that he woke up in a cold sweat and with his heart pounding wildly. Should I see a psychologist? Perico thought for the umpteenth time, rolling over onto his other side. He, a 30-year-old man, was now afraid of water. Swimming pools, lakes, rivers, seas. Actually, Perico liked to relax on the beach. He enjoyed sunbathing, grilling meat, and having fun with his friends. But he never went into the water, never swam, never even stepped in shallow water. The dark waters, which seemed so calm, hid a deadly threat. Breathlessly, Perico watched other people swimming and diving in the depths. Perico hid his fear from everyone. If people wondered why he was not going in the water, he simply said he could not swim. But that was a lie. Perico was a great swimmer. Before that situation, the boy was a professional swimmer. He even won prizes in competitions, and his mother still has his cups, medals, and certificates. Right before that memorable trip to the sea with his parents, when Perico was only 12, he managed to get a special sports category, and he was very proud of it. He thought he was a hero. He was the first in his team to achieve such great results. Perico wanted everyone to know about it. He wanted everyone to see what an experienced swimmer and a true athlete he was. The boy walked proudly along the beach. He looked at his peers splashing around in the shallow water in life jackets with some disdain. The teenager openly scorned those who did not swim well, and, like a young frisky dolphin, he dove in front of a crowd of people from the diving tower or cut through the waves in a breaststroke. Let them watch. Let them see what it's like to swim perfectly. That evening, Perico went to the beach with his father. His mother stayed in the hotel. Georgia, Perico's little sister, was sick. She must have eaten something bad. It was a pity because her older brother had almost taught her how to swim. The girl was quite good on the water. But now they have to take a break from swimming lessons. There weren't many people on the beach. A fresh breeze was blowing. There were waves and the sea seemed cold. It's been very hot for several weeks in a row, and today was the first cool day. Perico immediately noticed two girls on the pier, most likely locals, very tanned. Barefoot, long-haired. The boy really liked one of them, a skinny blonde with deep blue eyes. She was so beautiful and cheerful. She looked like a boy's classmate, beautiful Angelica. But even better. This girl was following Perico with her eyes. The boy could feel her gaze. She seemed to talk about the boy with her friend. The girls were whispering something and giggling. Perico decided he had to impress the girls with his courage and swimming skills. The teenager quickly threw off his t-shirt and jumped into the cold waves. Be careful, his father warned him. The sea is not calm. Do not swim too far. But Perico didn't listen. He played in the waves like a young dolphin, did spectacular exercises, and dived. Out of the corner of his eye, the boy watched the girls. They stopped talking and watched the impressive show. The blue-eyed blonde even opened her mouth in surprise, which encouraged Perico to do even more risky tricks. The teenager swam farther and farther away. His father did not interfere. He went away somewhere, probably to buy some food. He was confident in his son's swimming skills because Perico was already a professional swimmer. Besides, he was always serious and cautious. But not at that moment. Perico was catching waves, enjoying the wind, the depth, and his own skills. He was already far enough from the shore when suddenly he felt a painful cramp in his leg from calf to thigh. That was it. His body suddenly stopped responding. Both legs seemed to have failed. Perico tried to move his arms, they were strong. But his lower body was dragging him downwards and the shore was so far away. There was no way out. People on the beach were minding their own business and didn't see the boy. The girls on the pier already forgot about the boy who had worked so hard for them. They turned away and looked at something in the distance. Perico was terrified and could no longer swim. The pain in his leg reached an unbelievable severity. And then the boy went under the water for the first time. It was terrifying. All sounds, the cry of seagulls, distant laughter, the sound of an engine, a scooter whizzing by somewhere in the distance, all the sounds disappeared. He was sinking lower and lower into the impenetrable blackness. His lungs were bursting with pain. He was desperately short of air. The teenager made a tremendous effort and tried to swim. For a moment, he managed to get to the surface. The boy looked hopefully at the shore, which seemed to get even farther away. He took a saving breath and went under the water again. Perico dived out several more times before he lost all his strength from fear and wild pain in his leg. He sank to the bottom and was aware that he would never see the sun again. The darkness was frightening. He desperately wanted to be near his mother, to hear her voice. The lack of air made him dizzy, and he felt as if hot hammers were pounding in his ears. And then the boy felt someone's strong hands. Warm, reliable, saving hands. They were pulling him up toward the light, toward people, toward the sun. The boy began to clutch at his rescuer chaotically. The man pulled the teenager away abruptly, and the boy sank back into the cold, dangerous water. "Don't move, or we both will drown." The boy heard a stifled man's voice. These words brought Perico to his senses. He pulled himself together and remembered the coach's stories about the behavior of drowning people, which often made it difficult for lifeguards to pull them to the shore. It was difficult, but the teenager no longer blocked the man from pulling him to shore. Perico noted that his rescuer was an excellent swimmer. The boy saw that even in that horrible situation. The man held Perico with one hand, and he swam confidently and quickly enough with the help of the other hand. The shore was getting closer and closer. Finally, the teenager felt the bottom under his feet, touched it, and only then burst into tears. A man helped him out. It was an elderly man, as it seemed to the 12-year-old Perico, a strong, tanned, muscular man, but no longer young. Only now, when Perico became an adult, did he realize that his savior was only about 50 years old. But back then he seemed older than he was. "Are you all right?" the man asked, looking closely at Perico. "You should never go into the sea in this weather, got it?" "Yes, I got it." The boy nodded and thought that he would never go in the water after what had happened. He looked at the face of the man who had prevented the irreparable from happening, brown eyes, bushy dark eyebrows, and a thin scar that ran obliquely from his forehead to his upper lip, a whitish scar that was well visible on his tanned face. "Well, okay. I should go." The man seemed to be in a hurry. "Take care of yourself." And the savior hurried somewhere along the beach. Perico followed him with his eyes until he disappeared behind the rows of stalls with food. Perico's father was already approaching from the other side. He was returning with the hot dogs he went to buy at the cafe, away from the shore. It was cheaper there. And he saw the stranger pulling his son's flaccid body out of the water. "What happened to you?" The father took Perico by the shoulders and looked into his face. There was fear in the man's eyes, as if he were on the verge of panic. I almost drowned," Perico sobbed and clung to his father. He stroked his son on the back and head and said comforting words. He tried to calm the teenager's tantrums, to get the details out as quickly as possible. "I swam in deep water, my leg cramped up, and I started to sink. Dad, I thought I was going to die, and I would never see you again. But he saved me, he pulled me out of the water. Where is he, Dad?" I didn't even get a chance to thank him. "He ran away somewhere behind the stalls," his father answered, looking around. "I saw him leaving." When Perico had finally calmed down, he and his father went in search of the stranger who had saved the boy. They walked around the nearby market, asking vendors about the man with the scar. Everyone shrugged their shoulders. And only one woman, who sold bright water donuts, pointed in the direction of the village. That's where he went, with a little girl on his shoulders. Perico and his father went to that village, but no one there knew anything about the man with the scar. The boy never approached the sea again until the end of their vacation. He went to the beach every day, hoping to meet his savior. But the sea now terrified the teenager. When he entered the water, even up to his ankles, he was in a state of panic, his heart clenched, and it was hard to breathe. Perico immediately rushed back to the safe shore. After the incident, the boy began to appreciate life much more. Previously, he had never noticed how beautiful the flowers in the fields were and how pleasant the sounds of bird songs were. It turned out that the world was so bright, so interesting. The thought that he could lose it all because of foolish vanity and a desire to show off in front of the girls made him scared. He wanted to find the man who had pulled the silly boy out of the water and tell him at least a trivial thank you. But the man never showed up on the beach again. The family returned to the city, and preparations for the school year began. And after a couple of weeks of school, Perico realized that he could no longer go to the swimming pool. Every time he approached the swimming pool, he had a panic attack. He sat on the edge of the pool and looked down. Scenes from his vacation flashed in his head. The water was closing over his head. An irresistible force was pulling him down into the darkness, where there was no sun and light. His lungs were bursting with lack of air. No, he no longer trusts the water, and there is no way he will go to the swimming pool again. The coach scolded him at first, then tried to persuade him, then almost begged him. He didn't want to lose one of his most promising athletes. But it was all to no avail. Perico could not enter the water. Even the swimming pool at school, which he had attended since his earliest years, now seemed dangerous and frightening to him. Now the boy couldn't even take a bath, he only took a shower. Previously, he really liked a bath with fragrant bubble bath, it helped him to relax. But now it provoked unpleasant memories and caused hysterics. His parents didn't push their son, they almost lost him, and now they treated Perico with special care. And then those frighteningly realistic nightmares began. The boy could distinguish sounds, feel the coldness of the sea waves, and even smell the scents. He drowned again and again, went underwater, despaired and panicked, and then woke up in a cold sweat. The boy didn't tell his parents about his nightmares because they were too worried about his fear of water. Many years have passed, and Perico has become an adult. He was now living in his own apartment. He had been paying the mortgage for 7 years. He worked as a financier for an oil company, and he made good money by the standards of their city. But nightmares about that accident kept haunting him. Although these nightmares occurred much less frequently now, they were still very realistic. It happened again tonight. Perico glanced at the alarm clock. There was no point in falling asleep again. He had to get up in half an hour. He stretched, got up, and walked to the kitchen. His cat Esponjoso, a faithful friend whom Perico had once picked up outside a store, immediately woke up and followed him into the kitchen. It was raining heavily, and at first, the man was not even sure that the tiny, wet, shrilly squeaking lump was a kitten. Esponjoso looked so miserable. Perico simply could not pass by and leave the animal in distress. He took the cub in his warm palms, brought it home, fed it, warmed it up, and left it at home. Gradually the scrawny, shabby kitten grew in size and became a well-fed, good-looking cat. Perico made coffee and a sandwich. Then he opened the window and smoked. The advantage of living alone: you can do whatever you want, and no one will quarrel with you. However, he was already 30, and his parents insisted they needed grandchildren. Even his younger sister Georgia was planning to get married, but Perico wasn't in a hurry yet. He was satisfied with the way things were. A good job, a spacious apartment, and even a girlfriend, the beautiful and intelligent Gabriella. And the faithful, friendly cat. What else did he need to be happy? Perico realized it was time to start a family, and Gabriella had been hinting regularly lately. Perhaps he would have to make a decision soon. His cell phone vibrated quietly. It was a text message from Gabriella. She wished him a good morning and reminded him that they were going to her friend's birthday party today. Perico sighed. He didn't like that kind of activity. Gabriella had always behaved unnaturally around her friends, always hugging him with a fake smile, pretending eternal love, and laughing a lot. But what can he do? They were a couple. He believed it was necessary to respect his partner's wishes. If this party is so important to Gabriella, Perico will tolerate it somehow. In the evening, Perico and Gabriella were returning from a birthday party. The man wanted to leave early. He didn't like it there. Everyone was not real, not sincere, with fake smiles. Perico was bored around these silly, frivolous people. Gabriella frowned her eyebrows and flirted defiantly with the other men. Strangely enough, Perico wasn't jealous. However, when he said he had to go, Gabriella decided to leave as well. They were walking along the promenade. Gabriella grumbled she wasn't happy that Perico had left so early. And the man ignored her reproaches and enjoyed the view. It was spring, almost April. The twilight air was clean and fresh. Some branches, shreds of dry grass, and logs floated along the river. People were walking along the promenade. They enjoyed the wonderful spring evening too. Honey, it wasn't nice to leave in the middle of the party. Gabriella continued. She didn't seem to notice all the beauty around her. Why did you sit there all night disgruntled? You didn't even try to talk to anyone. Is it so hard for you to behave normally? I don't like these parties, and I don't like your friends, Perico sighed. How could he explain to Gabriella that the fake smiles and the unnatural laughter of her friends made him depressed? And conversations about the popular gadgets and arguments about whose car is the coolest were so annoying. As if there were no other topics to discuss. How come Gabriella doesn't see that? You'd better look at the beauty around you. Perico smiled as he looked at the waterfront. If we'd stayed at the party, we wouldn't have seen that beautiful sunset. Are you changing the subject again? Gabriella frowned. You always do that. It's just an ordinary evening. It's cold and unpleasant. I'm starting to freeze. Let's call a cab. Your idea to take a walk was stupid. All right, no problem. I will call a cab, Perico agreed easily. Maybe we should go to your place. Gabriella's voice became gentle. She smiled and looked at Perico. Perico realized that the girl had long been waiting for a marriage proposal, or at least an invitation to live together. He understood this very well, but he didn't want to share his home with Gabriella. It was enough for him just to date her. Sometimes the man felt like a scoundrel and almost a traitor. Because he'd been dating for so long, it was time to prepare for the wedding. Moreover, Gabriella constantly hinted at the wedding. She was certainly ready for marriage. But still, Perico was trying to understand himself. Either he didn't want to get married at all, or he was not satisfied with Gabriella as a potential wife. Lately, the man was sure that the second option was the answer. Why hadn't he noticed before that he and Gabriella were completely different people? Constant quarrels and arguments over every little thing. There had been no such thing at the beginning of their relationship. Gabriella had supported him in everything. Perico thought they had similar opinions about the main aspects of life. But now Gabriella was disappointing him more and more. Perico was in no hurry to ruin the relationship because there were a lot of good things, too. He hoped that it was just a difficult period, a crisis. The crisis would be over and everything would go back to normal. But now they should try to keep the warmth and sincerity of their communication. Yes, let's go to my place, Perico decided. I need compensation for a disappointing evening. Gabriella rejoiced and pulled herself closer to him. The man put his arm around her waist. But suddenly Perico noticed something strange on the bridge. There were not many people there, because it was quite cold. That's why the delicate female figure in a coat caught his eye. The woman was trying to hold back a little girl who was getting wild. The child kept trying to climb up the fence, jumping and running. Perico felt cold in his chest. For some reason, he knew that tragedy was inevitable. Gabriella was still saying something, but he wasn't listening to her. The man's attention was focused on the scene on the bridge. Why didn't the woman grab her daughter in her arms and carry her away from the dangerous place? Doesn't she understand it's dangerous for the girl? The girl is very skinny, and she could easily slip between the bars of the fence, and then the terrible and irreparable thing would happen. And that's exactly what happened. The little girl had broken free of the woman's grasp and rushed toward the fence. The bars, placed too wide, did not hold her, and the girl, like a lightweight toy, fell straight into the water. For Perico, it happened as if it were in slow motion. Even though the girl was small and light, she sunk into the water very quickly. In just a few seconds she was already deep in the dark, ice-cold water. And then the frightened, desperate, pain-filled cry of a woman sounded on the bridge. What is she doing? Is she crazy? Gabriella didn't understand what was going on. She didn't notice anything. The child fell into the water, Perico answered. He had already run to the fence along the sidewalk, taking off his coat and cap. People were bustling on the bridge. Someone was calling emergency services. Perico knew he had to act quickly. No matter how fast the emergency personnel arrived, it would be too late. This girl doesn't have much time. The water was too cold, and the current was too fast, so there were only a few seconds left. There was absolutely no one to help this girl, no one but Perico. Are you out of your mind? Gabriella tried to hold him by the sleeve of his sweater. You can't swim, stop. But only Perico knew that he really could swim. His skills couldn't disappear, his body would remember the movements, the man was sure of that. If you do that, you'll never see me again. Gabriella screamed in desperation, thinking it would stop him. The water was getting closer and closer. Perico took off his boots and stepped into the river. A scalding, restraining, frightening cold covered his whole body. But he had to hurry. So the man took a deep breath and quickly went further into the deep water. He was already up to his chest in the icy water. For a moment, that horrible fear returned. Scenes from his childhood flashed before his eyes, the moment when 12-year-old Perico almost drowned. Panic broke out, but the man stopped it. It was not the best time to panic. Perico hoped that the river was not too deep, but after 3 or 4 meters away from the shore, he could no longer feel the bottom beneath his feet. The man pulled himself together and began to swim. He felt like a dolphin again. His body obeyed him, the water no longer seemed dangerous and mysterious. Perico even wondered, why has he been avoiding water all this time? What was that all about? The man was rapidly approaching the girl. Her head appeared above the water, then disappeared again. Perico would have caught up with the little girl by now. He swam perfectly, despite the years of break. But the current was too fast. It took the poor child farther and farther away. And then there were the passing branches and logs. They were holding Perico back, stopping him. Cold, brittle, prickly logs. The thought of how scared the girl was now pushed the man and gave him strength. He must do it. He must save the child. After all, that man had saved him years ago. It must have been hard for him to swim through the waves, too, but he made it. This poor girl was just like Perico years ago. She needed help. People were running along the shore, shouting and pointing their hands in the direction of the girl, but no one got into the water. It is understandable, even a professional swimmer found it difficult to move in such conditions. The distance between Perico and the little girl was shrinking rapidly. However, the strength was fading fast, and Perico's limbs were already numb from the cold. But for some reason, his face was burning. Perico didn't dare even think about not being able to make it in time. He must save her. This girl has no one to rely on but him. Finally, the bright red hat was very close. Perico stretched out his arm and grabbed the girl by the shoulder. He expected her to grab onto his shoulder, but the girl looked so weak and lifeless. Fear flooded the man's heart. Was it too late? Perico held the child with one hand and tried to swim to shore with the other, struggling against the fast current of the river. The sight of the life-saving shoreline and the people at the water's edge gave him strength. The man felt the child's faint breathing and exhaled in relief. Apparently, the girl had simply lost consciousness. Perhaps this is for the best, less stress for the child. Maybe when the girl wakes up, she won't even remember what happened. Because those memories are very hard, sometimes unbearable. Perico knew that. The shore was getting closer and closer. Soon the bottom would be under his feet, and then it would become easier, much easier. Perico noticed that the people on the shore began to rustle, to get nervous. They were pointing at something to the right, and then the man felt a sudden blow. His ears began to ring, and bright spots scattered in his eyes. There were more and more of them, and then darkness and silence. Perico opened his eyes. Everything was so white, even his eyes were blinding. Where is he? The man looked around, some devices around him, lights blinking, something buzzing, some wires near his head. What is going on? Perico rose abruptly in bed, and everything around him spun. The man felt nauseous and hurriedly lay down on the pillow. After that, he felt a little better. So, he's obviously in the hospital. Something had happened. The last thing Perico remembered was the approaching shore and the girl's body in his arms. The girl, what about her? Had they managed to get her out of the water? That was the only thing that mattered to him right now, but there was no one to ask about it. Where is everybody? Perico tried to get up again. He needed to get out of the room, to find people, to find out everything. But he felt dizzy again. Everything was spinning before his eyes, nausea was getting worse and worse. It was impossible to go anywhere in such a state, so he had to lie down. The only thing left to do was to wait. The wait was not long. A nurse entered the room and approached the patient. What happened? Perico asked her. Is that really his voice? So weakened, so quiet, trembling. Have you come to your senses? The nurse smiled broadly. Great, I'll call the doctor. Wait, Perico held her by her robe. Do you know what happened to the girl? She was drowning. I tried to save her. She's fine. The nurse's smile became even wider and friendlier. The little girl is safe now, and you're a real hero. The woman left the room, and Perico was alone again. Now he was smiling. It means that everything was not in vain. The child is all right, and now he can relax. But now there was another question on his mind. What happened to him? The shore was very close. What had happened? Why was he in this condition? Perico could not remember. A few minutes later, the doctor, a tall man with glasses and tired eyes, entered the room. First of all, he shook Perico's hand and called him a hero, too. Then, he took a flashlight out of his pocket and, carefully lifting the patient's eyelids, shone it directly into his eyes. The edema is going down, that's good, the doctor summarized. And you are a real hero. The video of the girl's rescue has already been shown on TV, and it has already spread on the internet. News websites are only talking about you. By the way, we need to let the media know you have come to your senses. Maybe they'll want to interview you. But that's for later when you feel better. Perico didn't like all the fuss about his person. I suppose you are a swimmer? The doctor asked. You rushed into the ice-cold water without hesitation. And the current was so strong. I was a professional swimmer, but that was years ago when I was a kid. Without your help, this child would have had no chance. Is the little girl all right now? Don't worry, they took her to the children's hospital for a checkup. She has no injuries. You're less lucky. And she'll have 2 birthdays now. Perico suddenly thought that he had 2 birthdays since he was 12, too. Life is a very mysterious thing. Now the girl whose life he saved had 2 birthdays, too. What happened to me? The man asked. You were unlucky. You were almost near the shore when a heavy log hit you. People tried to warn you, shouting, but you couldn't hear them. It hit you right on the head, and it's good that it happened near the shore. If it had been there, in the depths, I don't even want to think what would have happened. After that, Perico lost consciousness and people dragged him and the girl to the shore. It was not difficult, as Perico was almost there. An ambulance was already rushing to an emergency call, so they didn't have to wait long for help. The girl was taken to a children's hospital and Perico to the trauma unit. The blow caused a large hematoma in the man's brain and he needed urgent surgery. The surgery was dangerous and it was impossible to predict the result of this intervention, but without the surgery, Perico would not have survived. There was no prognosis, the doctor admitted. But fate was merciful, you woke up. When the surgery was successfully completed, the whole hospital rejoiced. Everyone was worried about you. Now everything will be fine. But the doctor was too hasty with his promise that everything will be fine. Perico was not getting better, he was still dizzy with the slightest movement. He was not even transferred from the ICU to the recovery unit, he was too weak and unstable. The doctors did their best, the patient was surrounded by care and attention. The best doctors treated him, but there was almost no result. Perico could not get out of bed, he was constantly nauseated and had frequent headaches. The man spent most of his time asleep. Sometimes he suffered from nightmares, the usual ones about drowning and new ones in which Perico failed to save the girl. She kept slipping out of his hands and going to the bottom, and he watched it and could do nothing. It was scary. The doctor, bypassing the strict hospital rules, allowed family and friends to visit the patient. However, he strictly controlled the duration of such visits. Perico was very weak, he was contraindicated from any stress and any activity. The first people to enter the room were Perico's parents. The man was happy to see their faces. His mother's eyes were red with tears, and she looked tired and stressed. His father tried to control his emotions, but there was anxiety in his eyes. "We are so proud of you," Father said, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "But why did you risk yourself?" The mother sobbed and embraced her son. "You could have died. You have not swum for a long time. It is scary to think what could have happened. I had no choice. I couldn't just watch a child drown," Perico said. He really wasn't in the best condition, but he was alive. And the girl is alive. That's the most important thing. His friends showed Perico videos about him that had been circulating on the internet, cheered him up, and shared the latest news. But Gabriella never showed up at the hospital. And a little later Perico understood why. But it was later, when he was transferred to a recovery room. Not that the man missed her, just wondered. One morning the doctor walked into the ICU room with a bright smile on his face. Well, the latest examination results are encouraging," he informed the patient. "The new treatment is showing fantastic results, now things are going to work out." Perico smiled. He really felt better lately, and he could even stay seated for some time. Now he was really getting better. With each passing day, with each passing hour, the man was feeling better. He could feel his strength and energy returning to him. That made him very happy. Finally, the doctors allowed him to get up. With the help of the doctor, Perico walked to the window and back. It turned out that real spring was already coming to the city. The first green leaves appeared on the trees. He wanted to go outside, to breathe in the fresh smell of blooming plants, to walk, at least, in the hospital yard. After a few days, Perico was transferred to a recovery room, and immediately he felt better and much more comfortable. At least there was someone to talk to. Day by day the man felt stronger and healthier. On the first day, when visits were allowed without any special permission, she came to Perico. "Perico, come downstairs, some girl is waiting for you there," the nurse said as she entered the room. Perico easily walked down the stairs, still happy to be able to move without any help. They say that when you want to make someone happy, take something away from them, and then give it back. The man was sure he would see Gabriella in the lobby. He asked his friends and parents why the girl didn't visit him. But for some reason, they avoided answering. Perico thought it was scary for her to see her beloved in the ICU. Gabriella has always been too sensitive and emotional. And now that he was finally in the recovery ward, Gabriella decided to check on him. But there was only one girl in the empty lobby. It wasn't Gabriella. It was a beautiful, slender, tall, fragile girl with big eyes. Her long brown hair fell in loose waves to her shoulders, reflecting the sun's rays. Perico admired the stranger, delicate features, and graceful movements. She resembled the graceful dancers from the paintings of great artists, although she was just sitting on a chair and certainly did not intend to dance. "Hello." The visitor, seeing Perico, got up and rushed to him. The stranger had indeed come to see him, there was no doubt about that. Perico had never seen her before, but she obviously knew him very well. "Hello," Perico smiled. "Do we know each other?" Well, she was embarrassed. "I know a lot about you now." "And you?" "You don't know me yet, but I'll fix that now. My name is Julia." "Nice to meet you," Perico said, staring at her. She attracted him more and more, her voice, her movements, her manner. Everything seemed beautiful, mesmerizing, and so familiar for some reason. A strange, but very pleasant sensation. You saved my daughter. And me, too. So that's who this woman is. That's the girl's mother. Perico couldn't take his eyes off her big blue eyes, they made a nice contrast to her olive skin. Knowing that this beautiful woman had a daughter, and therefore most likely a husband, was unpleasant and almost painful. "So, it was your daughter?" "Yes," the visitor nodded. "Veronica. She got hysterical on the bridge, and I couldn't hold her. She slipped out of my arms and fell." Julia took a deep breath. She thought about that terrible moment that had almost ruined her life. Perico saw the suffering on her face and hugged the girl. She needed someone to support her. "Don't worry. It is all over now. Is your daughter all right now?" "Yes," Julia nodded. "She only survived because of you," witnesses told me later. She had already lost consciousness. It would have been too late in seconds. "Where is she now?" "At the hospital." "What?" Perico was really worried. "At the hospital? But why?" "The man has been in the hospital for over a month, he's still recovering. But he was seriously injured, and the girl. He was told that the girl was not injured. Then why is the child still in the hospital? Are they hiding the truth from him? Still don't want to worry him?" No. "Veronica is in the hospital not because of that accident," Julia hastened to explain when she saw Perico's confusion. "I mean, it is because of that accident, but it wasn't the water that hurt her." "I don't understand," the man said. "I will explain. Our story is not an easy one. It turned out that 6-year-old Veronica was an unusual child. She was born healthy and strong. In the first year, the child developed normally, but then her family began to notice some strange things about the baby. The girl was not interested in people. She was focused on the same objects and activities and was frightened of loud sounds. She liked silence and solitude too much. While Veronica's peers were actively exploring the world, she sat in the sandbox, filling the bucket with sand and pouring it out over and over again. She also started having tantrums when she was about 1.5 years old. The little girl could freak out about any little thing, and it was impossible to predict what it would be. Sometimes Veronica would suddenly lose control of herself and start screaming, running, and wriggling as if she were afraid of something. For a long time, relatives thought it was just a child's whims. After all children are very different. Veronica is just very sensitive. She is a girl, it happens. But Veronica didn't start talking at the right time, so Julia took her daughter to a neurologist. The experienced doctor referred the little patient to a specialized medical center. That's where Veronica got a frightening and incurable diagnosis. The girl will never be like everyone else. She would never go to an ordinary kindergarten or school. She will never work as a lawyer or an architect. At best, she will learn the simplest profession, and only if her parents will try very hard. Because the girl needs constant rehabilitation, otherwise, she'll stop responding to the world at all. Julia couldn't accept the diagnosis for a long time, crying at night. She hoped for a mistake, but Veronica's behavior only worsened. She had to pull herself together and take care of her daughter. My parents supported me, Julia confessed. Especially my father, he does so much for his granddaughter. He constantly takes his granddaughter to the sea and to dolphin therapy. He says they help her. Also, he takes her to the hippodrome and they spend a lot of time together. If her grandfather had been with her on the bridge that night, he wouldn't let that happen. That evening, Julia took her daughter for a walk along the waterfront before going to bed. The girl always slept better after such walks. Nothing foretold any trouble. Thanks to the constant therapy, the little girl felt much better. Attacks were recurring less and less frequently. From the outside, no one would have thought that something was wrong with the girl. And suddenly a dog barked loudly. A big, white, and probably kind dog. Some passerby was walking this dog. The animal was on a leash and in a muzzle. The dog definitely didn't mean anything bad. It just said hello, wagging its tail. Apparently, the dog liked children, saw Veronica, and decided to talk to her. The dog looked kind and friendly, but the loud barking scared the child. She flinched, went pale, and her face frowned. Julia realized that another attack was coming. She ran up and hugged her daughter tightly. Veronica's violent shrieks sounded on the embankment. The girl wriggled in her mother's arms, tears rolling from her closed eyes. Julia tried to hold her daughter, but she failed. Veronica was growing, getting stronger, and during the attacks, her strength doubled or even tripled in some unbelievable way. The fragile Julia simply could not hold her daughter. The girl broke free from her mother's arms, ran to the railing, and then all Julia could do was watch her child fall from a height right into the dark, cold waters. I was going to jump after her, Julia explained. I was almost ready, and I ran to the fence, but someone held me back. I watched her being carried away by the current, and there was nothing I could do. I can't even swim. My father tried to teach me many times, but nothing worked. Julia watched in horror as the river carried her daughter away. Veronica's red hat would appear on the surface, and then there was hope, but then it would disappear again into the dark water, and her heart sank. Julia screamed, begging to save her daughter, calling for Veronica and, for some reason, for her father. It seemed that no one in the whole world could help them. Her father, who could surely fix everything and save everyone as he always did, was not there. He and her mother traveled to the other side of the country to visit relatives, and Julia was left alone with Veronica. Because of her, Veronica is in the cold water right now. It's all the fault of the child's negligent mother. Julia decided that she would jump into the river, even if it cost her life, and no one would stop her. She couldn't live without her daughter and with this heavy burden of guilt on her soul. And then she saw a man, far below, on the shore. He was running, throwing off his clothes, and rushing straight toward the cold river. Veronica was not too far from the man. There was hope, a real chance that he would save the girl. Julia watched with a sinking heart as the man struggled against the current. Everyone who was nearby that night watched the scene. Many were filming what was happening on their phones. Some were calling an ambulance, the police, and the emergency services. I was mentally pushing you, encouraging you. I had so much hope. You were my only chance. I was so grateful for your courage. The others were only watching, but you rushed to help. Finally, the man managed to grab the child by the jacket. Julia breathed out a sigh of relief and immediately rushed to the stairs leading downstairs. Hurry up, hurry up. She must be on the shore when the man pulled Veronica out of the water. Her little girl is so frightened, she needs her mother, or Veronica will be hysterical again because there are so many strangers around. This is so stressful for the child. When Julia reached the shore, there was already a crowd of people there. When they noticed the girl's mother, the crowd parted to let Julia approach her daughter. Finally, there she was, Veronica. Someone had wrapped her in a blanket and she was sitting on the ground, wet, confused, pale. But she was alive. The main thing is that she was alive. Julia hugged her daughter with trembling arms. Out of the corner of her eye, the woman noticed the ambulance, which was already rushing to the scene at full speed. Had everything really ended well? It was like a miracle. She couldn't believe it. Julia turned around, looking for her daughter's savior. The man who had rushed after the child in the water without hesitation was lying unconscious. For some reason, his face was covered in blood, and people were running around, some wiping blood, some checking for a pulse. What happened to him? Julia asked anxiously. A log hit him, right on the head, the tall teenager explained eagerly. For him, everything that was going on was just a fascinating spectacle. Good thing he was already near the shore. People pulled them out. An ambulance arrived, and the doctors rushed to them. They quickly examined the man, put him on a stretcher, and wrapped him in a blanket. Is he alive? Julia asked them. But the doctors silently did their job. They loaded the patient into the ambulance. Another ambulance is on its way, the driver said, looking sympathetically at Julia. The man needs to get to the intensive care unit as soon as possible. Julia nodded. Relief that her daughter was okay was replaced by worries about the man. He saw the disaster and immediately rushed into the ice-cold river. Risking his life, he pulled the child out but was injured. And no one knows what will happen to him now. And then Veronica and I were taken to the hospital, and we spent a couple of days there. They examined her, and everything was okay. We were discharged, and then I found out everything about you, and it wasn't that difficult, because it's not an ordinary story. You were in bad condition for a long time after the surgery. A lot of people thought you'd become disabled. Really? Perico was surprised. They never told me that. I guess your parents asked the doctors not to tell you anything in order to protect you from additional stress, Julia smiled. During this time we became friends with your parents. They are wonderful. They said that you almost drowned when you were a child, and since then have never approached the deep water. But still, you rushed to help a child. It happened unconsciously, Perico smiled. I'm so glad your daughter is okay. You said she is in the hospital? Veronica is a special child, Julia sighed sadly. We try to protect her from stress and unnecessary worries. She shouldn't be nervous, and then this accident happened. Obviously, it affected her condition. Therefore, we needed unplanned hospitalization. But she is better now, much better. Good, Perico smiled. That's great. And I don't even know how to thank you, Julia confessed. You saved my daughter's life. And my life too. That's okay. You don't have to thank me. Perico said. I think everyone would do that. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time that night. And yet, I feel so guilty about your condition. Maybe you need something, medication, or a paid checkup. I would do anything. I talked to my father. He and my mother will be in the city soon. My father would do anything for you, too. No, I really don't need anything, and you don't have to do that, Perico said. You'd better spend the money on your daughter's treatment. It must be hard for you to cope with everything. And I've paid my debt. Perico really had the feeling that everything that had happened on the waterfront was no accident. His whole life he'd been tormented by the fact that he'd never thanked his savior. And now, he had pulled the child out of the water himself. The circle had closed. To relieve the girl's guilt somehow, he told Julia his own story. It turned out she already knew it from his parents. Apparently, his parents really communicated with Julia often. Can I ask you, where's the girl's father? Perico decided to ask the question that had long plagued him. Julia talked a lot about her father, but for some reason never mentioned her husband. Father? Julia grinned bitterly. Veronica has only me. Once, when I was a student, I went to the sea with my friends. sun, beach, laughter, fun. Well, I had a holiday romance with a young student just like me. I don't even remember what city he was from. We didn't exchange contacts either because we didn't plan to continue our relationship. And our feelings had cooled down by the end of the vacation. And when I came home, I realized I was expecting a baby. And I didn't dare to get rid of my baby. That's how I got Veronica. Oh, my gosh. Well, yeah. That's how silly I am. Julia smiled. I don't regret it. And even when I found out about my daughter's diagnosis, I never regretted anything. My parents helped me a lot. They love Veronica. She is the meaning of my life. The news that Julia was single suddenly made Perico happy. The man immediately felt confident. Strangely, he wanted to see Julia, to talk to her. Her presence filled him with joy and energy. Visiting time is over. The strict nurse announced. Please leave the room. Can I come again? Julia asked. I am so grateful to you and have so much to say. I will be waiting for you. Perico smiled and gently squeezed her hand. Perico couldn't stop thinking about the charming visitor. Her beautiful face constantly flashed before his eyes. She is so delicate, fragile, and elegant. And at the same time, so strong. It's no joke to raise such a difficult child alone. He wanted to please Julia, to protect her, to make her happy. Strangely, Gabriella had never aroused such feelings in Perico, even at the beginning of the relationship. Gabriella. She still hasn't come to the hospital to see him, and she ignored all his messages. His friends and family were stubbornly silent and wouldn't tell him what was going on. Perico even began to worry that maybe they were hiding something from him. What if something happened to Gabriella and they are hiding it to keep him from stress? After all, the doctor told Perico to avoid stress. No, nothing happened to her, Victoriano grinned. He was Perico's friend and colleague and came to visit him one day after work. Perico shared with him his concerns about Gabriella. Then why doesn't she show up and doesn't answer the phone? Okay, I'll tell you. We agreed not to tell you about this yet, just so you don't get upset. But I can see that you're nervous because you don't understand anything. Finally, someone gets it. Anyway, Gabriella is a traitor. Victoriano concluded. And, by the way, just so you know, I never liked her, she wasn't real. Watch your mouth, man. Perico was uncomfortable hearing his friend say that about his girlfriend. No problem, Victoriano shrugged. But, she left you, betrayed you when she found out that you would probably be disabled. I don't understand. Well, you didn't know, but the doctors gave a bad prognosis. Something went wrong after the surgery. I don't fully understand what it was about. The doctors said you would probably end up in a wheelchair. Your lower body and one arm were failing. You could have been disabled for the rest of your life. Perico exhaled. It was a good thing he didn't know the danger hanging over him. He had avoided so much stress. And Gabriella, when she found out about it, she immediately left. She said she wasn't ready to take care of a disabled man. That's it. Well, you can't blame her, Perico shook his head. Did the news hurt him? Probably not. It was impossible to expect any other behavior from Gabriella. On the contrary, the man suddenly felt a kind of relief. Gabriella would never show up in his life again. So, that's good. This relationship had been a burden to Perico for a long time. He was tired of feeling guilty before her all the time. She is already dating someone else. There was resentment in Victoriano's voice. She goes to clubs every night and adds new pictures from parties every day on her social media. She's having a lot of fun. Well, let her date other men. I'm happy for her, Perico smiled. So you're not even upset? Upset? I could be in a wheelchair, but I'm walking, even running already. How can I be upset? That's right, Victoriano smiled broadly. When you're discharged, we'll go fishing. But now you can't refuse, you'll swim with us to the other side of the river. And don't say again that you can't swim. I saw everything. The internet is full of videos from different angles. The whole city saw it. Julia came again. This time Perico waited for her impatiently, and when he saw the familiar silhouette in the hallway, he could not help but smile happily. They walked around the hospital square, talking. The girl's parents were already on their way, and Julia was waiting for them. She missed them and was tired of being alone. "How is your daughter?" Perico asked. Now he was very interested in Veronica's destiny. He wanted to make sure everything was going well in her life. He wanted her to have a long and happy life. "She's better now. She will be discharged soon." "I'll be discharged soon, too. The doctor said I could go home in about a week." "That's great." "Yeah, I'm sick of being in these four walls. Maybe you could give me your phone number." During the meeting, Julia and Perico somehow imperceptibly became closer. "Sure." Julia was overjoyed and told Perico the desired phone number. He went outside without his phone, so he wrote down the number on his hand with a pencil, which happened to be in his pajama pocket. "I'll be sure to call. I'll be waiting." Perico felt that Julia liked him, too. It made him feel happy, sunny, and warm. What if everything would work out for them? Veronica and her illness did not scare him. The main thing was that he and Julia enjoyed being together. Together they would easily cope with all their troubles and problems. Suddenly Perico realized that he was willing to do anything for her. They walked around the park some more. It was getting dark, and Julia needed to go home. This time Perico hugged her tightly. He wanted to kiss her, but decided that it was too early for such signs of feeling. And then Perico was lying on the narrow hospital bed, thinking how lucky he was. Gabriella will never come into his life again, one less problem. Now he is free and can begin a new relationship with Julia, with that graceful, elegant beauty that evokes such strong feelings in him. He and Julia met 2 more times before he was discharged. Their conversations became much more warm and frank. A special invisible bond gradually formed between the young people. It was as if they could sense each other from a distance. Sometimes, Perico would dial Julia to hear her voice, at least over the phone. And she would confess that she was just thinking of him. It was amazing. And then Perico was finally discharged from the hospital. The attending physician confessed that just a month ago he hadn't even hoped for such an outcome. "You are healthy, fully recovered." The doctor shook his head in amazement. "Well, sometimes miracles happen in medical practice, but your case was unique. You had such severe injuries, and now it is like nothing ever happened. Perhaps a divine power helped you because you saved a child. Thank you for everything you did for me." Perico thanked him sincerely. He saw and appreciated all the efforts made by the doctors and staff. They pulled him from the afterlife and put him back on his feet. It turns out that now he almost has 3 birthdays. It was a real blessing to be home after a long absence. Perico relaxed happily on his favorite couch. Esponjoso didn't want to get off Perico's lap. The cat really missed his master. Perico's friends took care of the cat while he was at the hospital. Perico gladly took a warm shower, ordered a pizza, and watched a movie. Today was the last day of his sick leave, and tomorrow he had to go back to work. It was time to get back on track and make up for lost time. And tonight he would finally take Julia on a real date. They were going to take a short walk downtown and then go to the cinema. After the movie, Perico would probably take Julia to a restaurant. The idea for the date was not original, but it was quite romantic. But in general, the place of the meeting was not important. The main thing was to be with Julia. Not in a hospital square, but in the freedom. And not as a patient in the trauma ward, but as who? A friend? A loved one? The man smiled. Julia didn't come to the date alone. She was holding Veronica's hand tightly. It was unexpected. "I had no one to leave her with," she shrugged her shoulders guiltily. "My parents had not returned yet, and my neighbor, who usually babysits her, got sick all of a sudden. So, I didn't even have time to warn you." Perico looked at the little girl he had saved. She was a beautiful big-eyed, cute child. She looked just like her mother. She had two blonde pigtails sticking out from under a thin knit hat. Veronica looked at the man with interest. Did she remember him? Probably not. The little girl seemed to be unconscious when he reached her. Nevertheless, Veronica suddenly smiled at Perico broadly and sincerely. Wow! Julia was surprised. She's usually afraid of strangers. I was even worried that she would get hysterical again. Veronica, as if to dispel her mother's doubts, suddenly held out her hand to Perico. He squeezed it lightly with a smile. It looks like we will become friends. Well, since we have such a change in the program, how about an ice cream cafe? I'll go anywhere with you. Julia smiled, slightly embarrassed, and Perico, he bloomed with these words. It was nice to walk along the streets of the city with Julia and little Veronica. The little girl walked between the adults, holding both of them by the hand. And then she enjoyed riding on Perico's neck. They looked like an ordinary family walking together. And they must have looked pretty good together because Perico caught the stares of passers-by. Some even smiled as they looked at them. Veronica hardly spoke at all, but in some strange way, Perico knew what she wanted. For example, seeing the child who rode the pony, the girl clearly tensed up, and the man guessed that she was scared. They just turned into a narrow alley. She is so calm with you, so cheerful. Julia wondered. Perico was pleased to hear that. And then they found themselves on a wonderful playground, numerous slides and swings, sports equipment, and fairy houses. Even a labyrinth, a real paradise for kids, and comfortable benches around it for adults. It was a weekday, so there weren't many people around. Perico thought Veronica would rush to explore this magnificent space. He would have loved to walk here as a child. But the little girl stared indifferently at the playground and held the man's hand tightly. I told you, she is special. Then Perico decided to do something different. He went to the playground together with Veronica. He found a swing with a comfortable cushioned seat, put the girl on it, and rocked her. At first, she obediently let him swing her, and then she began to move her body to the rhythm of the swing's motion. She liked it here, and Perico got a chance to talk to Julia. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. They sat on the bench, watching Veronica and holding hands. I'm sorry, she pointed her eyes at her daughter. I really wanted to spend the evening only with you. That's all right, Perico patted her shoulder encouragingly. It's better this way. I would have met Veronica sooner or later anyway. I'm very excited about this meeting anyway. Really? Sure. I've been looking forward to seeing you outside the hospital walls. And finally, we're walking around the city. Yes, it's a wonderful day. You know, Perico suddenly decided to be frank. I think I can't live without you, without both of you. I think about you all the time. I don't think that's ever happened to me before. Julia smiled, her eyes sparkling with quiet joy. It was obvious that she was pleased to hear Perico's words. I feel the same way, she said, looking straight into his eyes. You make me feel so peaceful, so safe. And so happy. I don't know how to describe it. It's great. Perico gently put his arm around Julia's shoulders. But he was confused by the shadow of sadness that clouded her beautiful face. I don't have a right to any of this. What do you mean? Perico didn't understand. Julia got nervous, and he didn't like it. He wanted to see her relaxed and happy as before. Well, I have no right to ruin your life. It's not that I have a child who is sick. Veronica, she'll never be like everybody else. Don't even think about it. I love you, and we'll get through this together. Please don't think of it again. So, Perico confessed his love for her so easily. He wanted to make Julia smile, or maybe even hug him and stop thinking that she could ruin his life. But Julia only shook her head. A few more weeks passed. Perico returned to work. His colleagues greeted him like a hero. Firstly, because of the sensational story of saving the girl. Secondly, there were too many cases waiting for Perico that only he could handle. "You saved the child, and now save us," the chief joked, handing Perico a pile of documents. "By the way, get ready, you will be transferred to the planning department. You will be the head of this department." What a twist! Perico smiled. He had waited so long for this position. It is more interesting and, most importantly, the salary is much better. And also business trips around the world. After the incident on the river, Perico's life changed for the better with dizzying speed. "You deserve it." Victoriano tapped him on the shoulder, the same friend who often visited Perico in the hospital and told him about Gabriella. Perico dated Julia. They saw each other almost every night. Her parents had returned to the city and now often stayed with her daughter, but Perico suddenly realized that he missed the girl. Sometimes he asked to take her for walks. He liked to surprise this child and to spend time with her. Seeing the smile on her face meant a lot to Perico. He tried to think up something interesting for the girl each time. He took her to the kennel of the husky dogs, or the reserve with deer, or they walked in the woods. The little girl liked Perico, and although she could not express her feelings in words, it was clear anyway that Veronica fell in love with her savior with all her heart. On a warm spring evening, Perico and Julia were walking along the promenade. "You know, I noticed you from this very spot," Perico suddenly remembered. "And you were over there, on the bridge." "I don't even want to remember that night," Julia confessed. "But, on the other hand, we would never have met otherwise." "I think we would have met anyway," Perico hugged Julia tightly. "I would have found you, for sure. By the way, I told my parents a lot about you. They want to meet you, do you mind?" "Me? No, of course, I don't mind. You see, even if we didn't start a relationship, my father was going to meet you. You saved Veronica. He's very grateful to you, and so is my mother. They want to tell you that. Have you told them everything?" Perico felt uncomfortable, same as always when someone called him a hero and praised his deed. "Well, yes, I told them. But even if I hadn't, they would have seen it anyway. There's a lot of information on the internet. Back then, when it happened, they didn't even hear it from me. Someone had sent them the video when they went to the other end of the country for a couple of months. And suddenly they got this video. Can you imagine? That's terrible. Dad wanted to get tickets and come back. I could barely talk him out of it. They had been planning this trip for so long. And there was nothing wrong with Veronica, so there was no point. Well, I can understand them. You know, Julia suddenly became embarrassed. My father wants to thank you." "Tell him he doesn't have to," Perico protested. "I don't need anything. I was paying back a debt, because many years ago someone saved me, too. The man took a risk. There were big waves in the sea. And, in fact, fate has already rewarded me. I met you. I've never felt anything like this before." "I tried to talk to him, but to no avail," Julia said. "When my father has made up his mind, it's hard to change his mind. I just warned you to be ready." "Well, okay, then I'll talk to your parents myself and explain everything. By the way, I'm going on vacation in a month. I think maybe we should go to the sea together, you, me, and Veronica." "Really?" Julia's eyes lit up with joy. "But you said you were afraid of water." "I think my phobia is gone. You know, I even enjoyed being in the water. Even under these circumstances. A long-forgotten pleasure." Wow. The meeting with Julia's parents had to be postponed. Veronica was sick, and Julia couldn't go out these days either. Perico missed them. He bought toys and fruit for the girl and brought a bag directly to Julia's home. Her parents were away that day. That same evening, Perico got a call from Gabriella. He was surprised to see her name on the screen of his phone. He had already forgotten she existed. "Hi, how are you doing?" she asked. "I'm fine," Perico said. "I know you are." There was a hint of resentment in Gabriella's voice. They say you are dating the mother of the girl you saved? Yes, Perico answered briefly. It's true, we are seeing each other. You forgot me so quickly. The man grinned. Gabriella abandoned him when he was in the hospital. And now she's making claims? Don't forget that you're the one who left me, the man reminded the girl. You don't know anything. I have a lot of things to explain to you. Can we meet? Let's talk on the phone, right now. It's such a sensitive conversation, it's better to talk when we meet. Well, all right. Let's meet in an hour at our favorite pizzeria. Okay. When Perico arrived at the pizzeria, Gabriella was already sitting at a table by the window. She looked wonderful, light makeup, and a beautiful dress. She looked fantastic, probably took a long time to get ready for the meeting. But why? Does she want him back? She certainly can't do that. Well, hello, Perico said, sitting down next to her. Gabriella smiled at him, sweetly and sincerely. Now she didn't look like the grumpy, selfish girl she had always been. I know, I understand. You think I betrayed you and left you in the hospital in a bad condition. Honestly, that's what it looked like. Exactly, it looked like that. But I just needed time to come to my senses. There was so much going on. You went to the hospital and you were injured right before my eyes. It was horrible. I thought you were dead. And then there's the news. What news? Well, that night, when we were walking along the boardwalk and all this happened, I wanted to tell you that I'm expecting a baby. Perico recoiled from Gabriella. A baby? What baby? That's impossible. But you were drinking alcohol that night at your friend's birthday party, weren't you? Why, if you knew you were pregnant and could harm the baby? That's not what Perico was going to say. He didn't know what to say at all. He remembered perfectly well that she had drunk a lot of alcohol that night and was even drunk. I was just pretending. I poured the soda discreetly into the glass so there would be no unnecessary questions. And what now? Now everything is okay. Gabriella put her hand on her not yet visible belly. I'm expecting a baby, our baby. I think it's a boy. But why are you telling me this only now? Perico clarified. He was still confused by the news. Everything in his life was going so well, so right, and suddenly his life was turned upside down. He imagined Julia's huge, trusting eyes and his heart ached, how to tell her about it. He would definitely have to tell her. At first, it was not clear at all whether you would survive or not. Then they said you would be disabled, Gabriella excused herself. I was just scared. A child requires so much time and care, and taking care of a disabled man, I would not be able to cope. So I decided not to say anything. I need to think about it. Perico got up from the table. I'll think it over, and then we'll decide what to do. I know you're dating the mother of the girl you saved. Gabriella held his hand. But it's not your child. She's just a stranger. Moreover, she's sick. You and I will have our baby, our healthy son, you know? Gabriella, I need time, Perico repeated, taking her hand away. I'll call you. I'll be waiting because I love you. At home, Perico turned on the TV in the background and collapsed on the couch. This was news he had not expected. It was convenient to think of Gabriella as a traitor who had abandoned him in his time of need. The problem resolved itself. Perico's conscience was clear. But suddenly everything turned upside down. He will have a child, his biological child. 6 months ago this news would have made him happy, but now he had Julia in his life. How complicated. If Gabriella really was pregnant by him, Perico would never abandon the child. The next morning, Perico arrived at work frowning and silent. Naturally, his friend Victoriano noticed this. By lunchtime, he went to his friend's office. What is the matter with you? Victoriano asked, sitting down in the visitor's chair. Nothing, the past came back to me, suddenly and at the most inconvenient time. Was it Gabriella? Victoriano has always been perceptive. Yes, Perico said frustratedly. You should have told her to go to hell. She found out you were promoted and showed up right away. Gabriella has always been mercenary and cunning. But I hope you told her that her position was already occupied by another candidate. I didn't tell her, she already knew about it. How sly she is. Victoriano grinned. I wish I had seen her face when you told her to go to hell. I didn't. Perico sighed. Gabriella is expecting a baby. I don't know what to do about it. Wait a minute. Victoriano was thinking fast. I don't think it matches with what I know about her. While you were in the hospital, she went clubbing every night, drinking alcohol all the time. That doesn't sound like the behavior of a pregnant woman, don't you think? I don't know, maybe it's because of stress? Are you sure it's your baby? While the doctors tried to pull you out of the afterlife, she was dating someone else. Perico shrugged. How could he be sure of anything? If it's your baby, it should be about 3 months, even more. Victoriano continued to think aloud. I don't know. I don't understand anything about it. She doesn't have a big belly yet. I would check it if I were you. Check how? Go to an ultrasound together. They'll tell you the exact week of her pregnancy. Perico liked Victoriano's idea to go with Gabriella to the ultrasound, that is, to show her his distrust. That would probably offend her. But, on the other hand, he really isn't sure. Gabriella's behavior is more than strange. Then Julia called and said that Veronica is getting better and she can stay with her grandparents, and she herself misses Perico very much and wants to see him. This is what pushed the man to take a serious step. Right after talking to Julia, he called the medical center and made an appointment for Gabriella to have an ultrasound. Then he called Gabriella and told her they needed to meet. The man asked Gabriella to come to the cafe at the appointed time. He chose a cafe that was near the medical center. He did not say the real reason for the meeting. His intuition told him Gabriella would definitely refuse. She would find a lot of things to do and reasons to avoid the procedure. Perico arrived at the cafe long before the appointed time. It was good that there were not many people there. Gabriella would probably make a scene. She is a drama queen. Gabriella finally entered the cafe, slender, beautiful, in a light white dress. Gabriella smiled sweetly when she saw Perico. She was sure she would win. She had a strong argument, his son. But when the man said she had an ultrasound in 15 minutes, Gabriella was furious. I'm not going anywhere. It's not good for the baby. My son will be born as sick as your new girlfriend's baby. It is necessary at your gestational age. It is for your safety and the safety of our baby, Perico said softly. We'll go together and get the answers to all your questions. I'm not going anywhere. You didn't even tell me beforehand. Don't you trust me? I don't trust you, Perico confessed. How can I trust you if you behaved so strangely while I was in the hospital? But if we go to the ultrasound now and it turns out that you were telling the truth, I'll apologize. I won't go. Gabriella kept protesting. It's humiliating. Why don't you believe me? Because we haven't talked in so long, and then you show up and suddenly shock me with this news. And I'm in a different relationship. I have a right to be sure, don't you think? Fuck you. Gabriella threw a glass of water right in Perico's face. The man was glad he hadn't ordered coffee. I can raise a child without you. If you have nothing to hide, prove to me what a scoundrel I am. From the confused Gabriella's look, Perico already understood everything. Gabriella was not pregnant, or pregnant by someone else. But he wanted clear proof so that he had no doubts. There's nothing to prove, Gabriella hissed suddenly. She had already realized that the plan had failed. Her face showed it. You're so stupid. Why am I stupid? I'm not that stupid, I didn't fall for your trick. Fool. If we were together, if we were married, I'd give you a healthy child, and I'd be the perfect wife. But you chose a woman with a disabled child. And it's not even your child. She'll ruin your life. Why would you want that kind of happiness? I guess you are really stupid. So there is no baby after all. That's what I expected. Yes, no baby. I made it all up to get you out of trouble. To keep you from ruining your life, to save the fool. I thought you didn't know how to get rid of those people. I offered you the perfect plan to escape from them, but you chose to ruin your life. Gabriella, Perico softened suddenly. The news that Gabriella was not pregnant was a relief. Now there were no obstacles to a relationship with Julia. Everything else seemed insignificant now. Perico felt no anger or irritation toward Gabriella. What, Gabriella? The girl looked at him sternly. I'll take care of my own life, okay? And you. Just get on with your life and stay out of my way. Perico returned from the cafe in high spirits. His mind was relaxed and peaceful. And in the evening he has a meeting with Julia. After a short separation, this date was especially joyful. With her it was not even necessary to talk about anything. Being with her was enough to be happy. It was time to make a decision. Perico didn't want to part with Julia. He needed to see her every day. He wanted her to always be there for him. Suddenly Julia, a little embarrassed, said that her parents wanted to meet Perico and waiting for him to visit. I tried to talk them out of it, but my father insisted. Why did you talk them out of it? Perico didn't understand. Well, it's too official, I guess. I thought, what if you don't want to? On the contrary, Perico smiled. I want to meet them. They should meet the man their daughter and granddaughter will soon be living with. Well, if the daughter and granddaughter don't mind. What? You and I haven't discussed this yet. Julia smiled. Julia, I love you. You know that. I think it's time for us to get married. And I'll adopt Veronica, do you mind? Me? Julia looked at Perico with her eyes wide open. She had a happy smile on her face. I don't mind. Maybe that's not how a marriage proposal should be made. I don't know, I'm not good at such things. But I'll fix it later. There'll be a restaurant and a ring. I just wanted to get your opinion first. Did you have any doubts? Julia asked. Instead of an answer, Perico kissed her. Perico was nervous before the meeting with Julia's parents. He made preparations. He bought a bouquet for Julia's mother and a bottle of good whiskey for her father. Obviously, he did not forget about Veronica. The man always made surprises for her. This time he found a hilarious cat from the girl's favorite cartoon. At the appointed hour, Perico was standing near their front door and did not dare to press the bell. What if Julia's parents would not like him? What if they don't welcome him into their family? But when he saw the joyful face of Julia's mother, Perico calmed down. An elderly woman with the same eyes as her daughter greeted him with a friendly smile on her face. You must be Perico? She asked. Julia has told me so much about you. At that moment, Julia and Veronica appeared from somewhere. Both of them rushed happily toward their guest and hugged him. They led Perico to the living room, where the table had already been set. Where is your father, Julia? Perico asked. He had to go to work urgently, but he'll be back soon, Julia answered. Julia's mother told a lot about her daughter's childhood. The conversation was relaxed and easygoing. Perico noted that Julia's parents were much older than his parents. The only child in the family, who was born relatively late, Julia was supposed to grow up to be a spoiled, selfish princess. But she turned out to be a kind, well-mannered, and compassionate girl. Finally, a tall, elderly man entered the living room, and Veronica immediately rushed to him. He easily picked up his granddaughter in his arms and kissed her, then held out his hand to Perico. Perico stared at the man's face without taking his eyes off of him. Tan skin, dark eyebrows, deep brown eyes. And the scar, a thin whitish scar running from his forehead to his upper lip. It was him. The man who had rescued him many years ago. It was the same man Perico was trying to find to say thank you. He turned gray and got older, but the scar was exactly the same. Perico waited impatiently until he was alone with Julia's father. He went outside for a smoke and Perico followed him. "I don't know how to thank you for my granddaughter," Julia's father said while smoking a cigarette. "She's our whole life. And you are a hero." The water was freezing and the current was strong. "You definitely knew you were risking your life, but that didn't stop you. You're so brave. I'll do anything for you, just ask." I was paying back my own debt. To you, as it turns out now." "What do you mean? Were you on vacation by the sea, near the Sunnyland Hotel 18 years ago?" "Yes." The man nodded, looking intently into Perico's face. "And you pulled a teenage boy out of the water, who had foolishly swum far from shore during the storm, right?" "Right." "How would you know?" "So, it was you." Perico brightened. "That scar on your face, I recognize it. I was that boy. All these years I regretted that I hadn't had time to thank you. My father and I tried to find you later, but you couldn't find me. It was the last day of our vacation. We went home that night. I came with my daughter, with Julia, just to say goodbye to the sea. So I noticed you. I left her on the beach and rushed to help you. That incident changed my whole life. You quickly left. I wanted to find you. And that's how it turned out. We met after all these years." "I rushed to Julia," the man said. "I left her alone on the beach. I was afraid someone might take her away, or she might go into the water without me. She was born quite late in our family, have you noticed?" Now I understand where you disappeared to that night," Perico said. "We had a son, handsome, intelligent. He died early. He was coming back from the army. He was attacked, robbed, and thrown off the train at full speed. He didn't survive. My wife and I thought our lives were over. And then Julia was born and saved us. And then Veronica. They are everything to us. I know, I'll protect them and take care of them." "I know, boy, I'm sure about it," Julia's father said. And then he added, "If I hadn't pulled that teenager, out of the water back then, no one would have saved Veronica either." "Such a boomerang." "Yeah, boomerang," Perico agreed.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.